Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Just think of Dhruva Maharaj chanting that. I was just reading this story. He ended up eating leaves and twigs and then just drinking water and only air. But we don't try that. Okay. As it is. Text 49, starting over. Asakta Buddhi Sarvatra Chitatma Vigata Spriha Naishkarmya Siddhim Paramam Sanyasenadhigacchati Asakta Buddhi Sarvatra Chitatma Vigata Spriha Naishkarmya Siddhim Paramam Sanyasenadhigacchati Asakta Buddhi Sarvatra Chitatma Vigata Spriha Naishkarmya Siddhim Paramam Sanyasenadhigacchati Asakta Buddhi Sarvatra Chitatma Vigata Spriha Naishkarmya Siddhim Paramam Sanyasenadhigacchati. Word for word. Asakta Buddhi, having unattached intelligence. Sarvatra, everywhere. Jita Atma, having control of the mind. Vigata Spriha, without material desires. Naishkarmya Siddhim, the perfection of non-reaction. Paramam, supreme. Sanyasena, by the renounced order of life. Adhigacchati, one attains. Translation. One who is self-controlled and unattached, and who disregards all material enjoyments, can obtain, by practice of renunciation, the highest perfect stage of freedom from renunciation. We'll repeat this together because there will be a test afterwards. One who is self-controlled and unattached, and who disregards all material enjoyments, can obtain, by the practice of renunciation, the highest perfect stage of freedom from reaction. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Real renunciation means that one should always think himself part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Remember that, it'll be on the test. And therefore, think that he has no right to enjoy the results of his work. Since he is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, the results of his work must be enjoyed by the Supreme Lord. This is actually Krishna consciousness. The person acting in Krishna consciousness is really a sannyasi, one in the renounced order of life. By such a mentality, one is satisfied because he is actually acting for the Supreme. Thus, he is not attached to anything material. He becomes accustomed to not taking pleasure in anything beyond the transcendental happiness derived from the service of the Lord. A sannyasi is supposed to be free from the reactions of his past activities. But a person who is in Krishna consciousness automatically attains this perfection without even accepting the so-called order of renunciation. This state of mind is called Yoga Rudra, or the perfectional stage of yoga. As confirmed in the 3rd chapter, Yastu Atmaratir Evashat, one who is satisfied in himself has no fear of any kind of reaction from his actions. Om Jnana-timiranya Saganagana Salakaya Chaksuran Milatanyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So what would this mean by self-controlled? As living entities, we're called Tatastha Shakti. We're like that piece of sand that's close to the water, and sometimes it's covered and sometimes it's not. So, in our case, we are very small. Show me how big 1/10 the tip of a hair is. How big is 1/10 the tip of a hair? Okay, now 1,000th of that. Still too small, right? We have numbers so big and so small, right? But that's what's in reality. But here, we find we may be insignificant. We may not be anything important or big. But when we're connected to Krishna, we can have this self-control. Can you create electricity? No. Can you give a shock to someone? If you stick a fork in the wall, will you feel a shock? No. No? Yes, you will. And if someone grabs you, though, they won't feel the shock, will they? They will. Don't try that. Did Prabhupada ever stick a fork in the wall? Yes. He did, as a child, yes. He did. So, when we're connected, that's when we can have the self-control. I may not be able to. You can create a little electricity that way, but not enough to run the house. But if we just know where to turn the switch, we can have that. So here's something, how to get that. And what is unattached? Well, there's 3 kinds of things. We can be attached to something, or we really want it bad, we have to have it. Detached is, I don't want any part of that. I'm away from that. Unattached is we're not concerned either way. If it can be used in Krishna's service, okay, we use it. If we don't need it, then we don't have it. That way we're not saying, oh, take that car away. Or, oh, I need a car like that. Right? We don't need it and we don't not need it. If it's there, we are not attached either way. So the idea is not to be detached, but to be unattached to the material things. And we disregard material enjoyments. What does that mean?
We don't want to sense gratify ourselves.
But what does disregard mean? It's obvious that. What does disregard mean?
Ignore it.
Yeah, you take no interest in it. It's almost if it ignores, like, oh, I ignore you. But it's like there may be a bug over there, but you disregard it. It's like you just don't take any interest. You ignore it means you're trying to. But disregard just means you just don't give it any regard or any attention.
Every kind of work should be done in the service of Lord Krishna. We should do like this.
Yes, we're disregarding the things because we're just not interested in it. It's like when we walk by, there may be some berries in the tree that the monkeys eat or some leaves that something else eats, but we disregard it. We don't give it any regard. We don't give it any attention at all. We're not interested. We're not trying to say, I'm attached to that, oh, I'm averse to get that away. It just doesn't catch our interest at all because we have something better. Krishna says that even if the taste for sense objects remains, by experiencing a higher taste, we can become fixed in consciousness. So this is interesting here, what else he says. is that the whole idea is we realize that we're a part and parcel of Krishna. Just like when you have the parts of a car, you connect them to the car. You don't try to use each of them separately. The carburetor puts the, it mixes the air and the petrol to run the car, and then you have tires, and then you have oil pump, you have so many things which by themselves would do nothing, but parts and parcels, they all work together. And the parcel, reason it's a part and parcel means we're not a part that just merges together. A parcel is like a box. It has its separate identity. So even though we're a part of the Supreme, we're a parcel because we still have our separate identity. Whereas like a drop of water may be a part of the ocean, but it doesn't really have a separate identity. It's merged within it. But being a parcel, like if a parcel is in the ocean, it's in the ocean, but it's still contained as a separate parcel. So that's what that means, part and parcel. It means we still retain our individual existence. And the results should be enjoyed. This is the idea we forget. Most people are in the business of trying to get the results for themselves. Krishna even says we have a right to perform our duty. Many Indian people quote in this verse in the 2nd chapter. They say, Krishna says I have a right to perform my duty. Is that true? Yes.
But they don't know the other part.
That's the other part. They take the part out. I remember when I was first in South Africa, one person said, so these Americans will speak some things you like and some things you don't like. So you accept the things you like and you reject the things you don't like. Just like that car. Say you don't like certain parts and you like others, you just take certain parts out and drive away that way, right? Does that work? No, it doesn't. No, and if the mechanic says that to you, he's cheating you. So, the last part of that verse says, but we're not entitled to enjoy the fruits of the action. Krishna goes through this many times. In just 701 verses in this Bhagavad-Gita, he talks about how we should not be attached to the results. But he gives it more as a kind of cost-to-value ratio. He doesn't do so much like some groups say, you'll go to hell. He explains that if you're attached to the results of the actions, you have to suffer and enjoy the reactions. So Krishna gives what happens. If you're unattached, you become free. What does he mention in this purport here? Something about freedom there? Oh, the end of the verse. The highest stage of freedom from reaction. So what do people want in? Mainly people want to fuel everything else. What do they want? Money. Because if they have money, then you can have power, right? And then they can maybe have the women they want, go the places they want. So particularly, what it is do they think that they're getting?
Happiness.
Freedom. Happiness, but freedom to go when and where they want to go. But quite often they're working so hard to obtain this freedom, and then they can't enjoy the simple pleasures in life. They can't go to Vrindavan because they have to stay in the 5-star hotel, which is in a big city with lots of noise and lots of pollution. And people think, well, I'm free to go off and engage in so many activities. But then those activities bind them. Krishna shows us the cost to value, that we engage in certain activities, we have to suffer for them. So this is what he's trying to show in this verse. The highest stage of freedom he gets. He is accustomed to not taking pleasure in anything beyond the transcendental happiness, because you're going to lose that. Just like if you have a job that pays you 1,000 rupees an hour, is that a good amount? Say it pays, what is? 1 lakh per hour, and I say, hey, come work for me for 10 rupees an hour. Will you want to do that? But I am paying you, right? So if you come to work for me for 1 hour, are you gaining 10 rupees? Yes, but what are you losing? You're losing the lakh, because you could be working over here for 1 lakh of rupees an hour. So by taking that hour away, you think you gained 10 rupees, but you lost 999,000, right?
But if he's not convinced that he's losing, then...
Yeah, but it doesn't mean you're not, does it? Right?
That is our perception, but he thinks that he's not losing anything. He's
Right.
thinking that 10 rupees is more than... He doesn't even believe that lakh rupees exists. There is such job.
That's his problem, right? He doesn't believe that exists. It's like I told people, if you give me 1 lakh of rupees, I'll show you how I can make. You give me a crore of rupees, and I'll show you how I can make a crore of rupees in 1 day. You know how I do it? I keep your crore of rupees, right? I didn't say you would, I said I would. So, in this material world, we're promised a ring, but it turns out to be a suffering. So we're not happy with that. So we find that we're much happier when we actually give our life to Krishna and we enjoy in relationship to Krishna. Say my ear is hungry. I put food in my ear, right? Put food in the ear and in the eye, in the nose, because they all need nourishment, right? And rub it on your legs, put between your toes, right? But if I put it in my mouth and then keep it there, because the mouth needs it. Yeah, chew. That's Prabhupada used to chew, because you're supposed to chew it before you. But then when it goes to the stomach distributes it. So in the same way, when we are watering the tree, if you water just your leaf, the whole tree dies. And we get along better when we realize that Krishna is the root of the tree and we're all the leaves. Some of us might be lighter, some might be darker, some might be older. Okay, I'm an older leaf, but at least we're all in the same tree. And that's the whole idea, that we're all on the same tree. And so to serve the whole tree through the root becomes more advantageous. Otherwise, I say, you know what? I'm upset with you, so I'm going to burn the branch that you're on. Does that do much good? It doesn't, because I'm in the same tree. So what this shows is that what it means when we give the results to Krishna, when we're working, what are we thinking? We are thinking the results. What does this mean I do to give results to Krishna? It means that I give some service to Krishna. Yes, we're trying to please Krishna. And we please Krishna by doing some service for Krishna, by having our thoughts dwell in Krishna, by glorifying Krishna, by chanting his name, by giving some of the money we earn to Krishna, right? We don't think the one man went to the deity of Tirupati. And this is the difference. In bhakti, whatever we get, we give some to Krishna. But he said, Krishna, I'll make you a deal. He said, if you help me win the 1 lakh rupees, we better call it a crore now, because the crore is the new lakh, right? So he says, if you help me win the crore of rupees, I will give you half of that money, right? This is how we approach God. We go to him with a list, tell him what he's supposed to do. This is how many people think. So we give him a list of what he's supposed to do. So the man goes and plays the lottery, and he wins half a crore. So he goes back to the deity. He says, my dear Lord Krishna, I am so thankful that you helped me win this money, but I only have one question. Why did you take your half out first? There was a comedian, George Carlin, who must have heard this from Prabhupada, because he said that the shopkeeper is praying to God, please God, make sure that no one breaks in my shop and steals something. And the thief is praying, please God, make sure the shop is unlocked so I can go in and steal something. And he said, but what's the use of being God if you don't know what to do until someone prays to you and gives you instructions? Do we really think that's the point? We think of all these things that are going on, and we think they're big deals, and Krishna solves them easily, right? Some of the big deals we don't worry about. The sun is now, what, 93 million, the Earth is 93 million miles from the sun, which is what, 150 million kilometers? So let's say it goes to 60 million miles, which would be 100 million kilometers, or if it goes to 200 million kilometers, which is like 125 million miles. Which of those would be a big deal? Either one. Too hot or too cold, right? So that's actually a big deal that the Earth stays in orbit right where it's supposed to. But do we worry about that?
No.
Do we do anything to make sure it happens? Do we have any idea what to do to make it happen if we needed to? It says, now you need to make sure this happens. What would you do? Calculator? Google it?
No.
No. You didn't check Krishna's figures?
No.
Someone asked me that. They says, how did he manifest as the cows and the cowherd boys? So why, are you going to check his figures on that? Said he did explain it to someone, but you know who he explained it to? Balaram, because Balaram is an expansion of Krishna, and he's qualified to understand this. As they say in places, it's beyond our pay grade to understand exactly how that's done. Obviously, Krishna has a formula, and he can explain that to Balaram, but we wouldn't be able to understand this. It's beyond our... But Krishna pervades and supports these universes with just a fragment of his energy. So why not be connected to him? In this world, we want to be connected to people who are very beautiful, very rich, right? Very famous, very intelligent, sometimes very renounced. What else? Strong, right? We want to be associated with those people. But who exceeds in all those qualities? Krishna exceeds in those. So when we're working, we should be working how we think we can satisfy Krishna. And if we have a home and we have children, see, like Brajendra Kumar is here and his son is here, see? If you have a child, you have one that can be a brahmachari, right? You try to give them some Krishna consciousness. That's why I'm glad my children are, you know, they've never eaten meat. People say, do you ever eat meat? No. And it's amazing. Indian people come to America, and my granddaughter says, how can you eat meat? I thought Indian people aren't supposed to eat meat with it. You know, but some of them come there and do, because they miss this part about bhakti. They do some pujas for some material benefit. Like today, in the lecture, they are talking about mukti, bhukti, and siddhi, right? Which one of those three do we want? No, you knew it was a trick question, right? Which one is the mukti? So some of the young Indian people, they become frustrated because they see Brahmins aren't teaching spiritual advancement. They're saying how to do some puja to get some material benefit. But you can just get a job to do that. But can you get a job where they pay you in Krishna Prema? Yeah, here. Here. But I mean other places, right? They pay you, and they may give you a list that it might not be real. You write out Krishna Prema, right? It might not be real. So this is the idea, is that we're offering the results to Krishna. And Prabhupada gave us this in the 5th chapter of Bhagavad-Gita, what he calls the peace formula. And using this formula, we can have peace of mind, because we can understand how to be concentrated on Krishna in 3 ways. We understand that Krishna is the supreme... Come in? Yes? Oh. Krishna is the supreme controller, that he's in control of everything. So if he's in control of everything, what do I need to worry about? Keeping the sun at the right place? The moon, the earth at the right place? Is that a big deal? It is. No, it is a big deal. It's bigger than the little things we worry about. But do we worry about it? So we must have some faith that someone's keeping it in order, don't we? This is funny. Isaac Newton, who discovered the ideas about gravity and the planets revolving, his friend told him that, no, there's no creator behind this. It all happens just by chance. So he made a model of the solar system with a bicycle that pedals and moves all the planets, and he put it in the man's living room. And the man woke up and said, where did this come from? He said, well, it just manifests on its own. Oh, he says, that's not possible. He said, but you think if the real thing is possible to manifest on its own, why can't the model manifest on its own? It would seem even more likely, wouldn't it? For it just to manifest on its own? Do these things manifest on their own? Sometimes they disappear on their own, but that's usually because someone steals them, right? People said their phones disappeared or were lost at the Rath Yatra, but I'm sure someone else knows exactly where they are. So this is a difference. If Krishna is in control, what do I need to worry about? So we make the deals with God. I did this. I was in Paris, France, as a brahmachari, and it was freezing cold. So I prayed to Krishna. I said, Krishna, I'll make you a deal. If you get me out of this cold, I promise never, ever to complain about heat, ever. 3 days later, a letter came from Prabhupada that said, please send 3 brahmacharis to India. So I was off. We took the Afghan Airways plane. It went from London, Paris, Rome, Athens, Greece, Cairo, Egypt, Beirut, Lebanon, Tehran, Iran, Kabul, Afghanistan, and Delhi, India. And it was a DC-3. I think it probably had to be returned to the museum after we flew in it. Pop, 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 pop. Not these big jets like now, but this was 1971. So I got on the plane and it was snowing. And when I got off, it was like maybe 95 degrees Fahrenheit, 30 degrees Celsius. And that's a big change, but I promised never to complain about heat. So they say, be careful what you pray for, you might get it. Yeah, and what's also our thoughts, what we're thinking about, our desires are a form of a prayer. Do we think Krishna doesn't hear those? Boy, I really wish I could have one of those, right? I wish I could be like that. So, if Krishna's in control, then we don't have anything to worry about. So many of the things that I'd seen to worry about at the last minute, Krishna arranges it. Like now, I was supposed to go visit my daughter in Bali in 11 days, and she was on her way back from America. And I told her before not to leave on a Thursday afternoon. And sure enough, the flight in Taipei, then they decided the Bali airport was closed, right? So, so she's stuck in Taipei, Taiwan. And I'm thinking, well, I have to get there too. But of course, if I can't get there, she can't get there either. And then I called the airlines and they said, well, they can work out some other things where, they can fly to a different city 170 miles away and take a bus or do something different. Or Krishna will have some other plan. Krishna always seems to work things out. I remember when they asked me to go to South Africa, I said, well, why me? I said, well, why not me? And now, I went there and the sannyasi left me alone. I woke up, there was a note, Dear Shuddhi, decided to split. So I turned the page over because I thought, well, there's got to be more. The two of us are thousands of miles from any devotees, and we're maybe, 2 miles or 4 kilometers from any neighbors. And I looked for the other page. This was my explanation. Of course, he took the money, but we collected a couple $1,000 or something when we first got books, and then he was gone. So there I am all alone. And I'm thinking, wow, here I am alone, but I guess I have to do what I can in Krishna's service. The idea is to turn the result over to Krishna. So I thought, well, I better write to Prabhupada and explain what happened, and what I need to do. There's nobody here to ask. So I decided I would order more books, to help pay off the debt. I said, that doesn't sound good, even though it's true, right? As I said, I owe you money, but if you could give me some more, I'll use that to pay it off. Even if it's true, it doesn't sound good, does it? Even if it's possible. And then I was going to order incense sticks and to make incense to sell at the programs, and I'd concentrate on paying off the debt, even though I do some programs, and I thought maybe I'm in trouble for making all these choices. That, here I am stuck alone. It wouldn't be, I'd go to a country where I didn't know who was going to kill me first, because the white police would shoot Africans, so Africans would hate me for being whites, and the whites would hate me for mixing with non-whites. So some of the people liked me and some of the people didn't. But the ones who didn't had all the guns, so that made it. So I was there in that country being left alone with a big debt. You wouldn't think that as being something you'd want. But when the letter came back from Prabhupada, I thought, I wonder if I'm in trouble. So I opened up the top of the letter, and it says, I'm very much pleased. So, well, the rest has to be good, right? I'm not in trouble. It says, at the responsibility you've taken to spread Krishna consciousness in South Africa at such a young age. So all the things you wouldn't think you'd wish on yourself, became a great blessing. Another one, the thieves came through the door and stuck a gun at my head. One said, get under the bed. And 4 of them had guns, and one with a crowbar to pry things open. And one with the crowbar said, shoot him. And the one with the gun said no. And I thought, well, even if he's a bad shot, he can't miss. The gun is at my head. But I'll tell you what, while they were arguing, I got 2 very good rounds done. Because this was going to be the last ones, right? There wasn't going to be, well, tomorrow I'll start, this was it. I said, Krishna, this is it, isn't it? So if Krishna's the supreme controller, he can work out all those things. But the things come up, like wondering about the flight, and I'm going to Delhi, I have to leave Vrindavan, but I'll get to lecture at the different temples there. And it'd be, in Krishna's service, everything will turn out all right. Which shows the next thing is that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. We do the things for Krishna's enjoyment, as we are talking about, turning the results over to Krishna. When I try to become the supreme enjoyer and become Krishna's competitor, good luck with that, right? And we end up just suffering. And then, of course, when we really need the help, Krishna's our supreme friend. We all need a friend in this world, but Krishna has all the things we really need. He's our supreme friend, he's a supreme controller, and the supreme enjoyer. But what really brings these out is to have the contact with somebody who already has these qualities, right? Like if I'm going to learn to play cricket, who should I go to? Sachin Tendulkar or to the Mali out in the garden? He's also swinging a stick at the bushes, right? I go to him, yes? Because he really knows it. So the same way, for us to develop these devotional qualities, we go to Srila Prabhupada. In the old days, we could go into the room and see Srila Prabhupada. He would arrive at the airport. I remember in Mumbai that I would hear him translating the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. But I couldn't hear the whole thing because I was going into the kitchen to get things ready for the offering, and then I was going to do the artik. But today, I can hear the whole thing. Today, I can lift all of Prabhupada's books over my head with one hand. I put them in this Kindle here and lift them up. So now I can read any canto I want. Prabhupada says he puts all of his ecstasies into these books, and so we can have contact with Prabhupada. So we have contact with Prabhupada by meeting his devotees. The first time I heard chanting, these people were singing this song. I said, where did you hear this song? And it was the Hare Krishna mantra. They said, we heard it from the Swami Prabhupada on Pico Boulevard in Los Angeles. This was before Watsika was La Cienega, before that was Pico. And I sang that with them. And within the next week, a friend of mine was shooting at animals, and he killed a bird. I said, that's a cruel thing to do. He said, you eat meat, don't you? I said, yes. He said, how many animals do they have to kill for you to eat meat? I said, probably a lot. He said, so is it any worse for me to kill one more bird? I said, you're right. He said, it's okay for me to kill the bird. I said, no, I'll never eat meat again, and I didn't, and that was 1967. So because I chanted, it took a step to Krishna, he took 10 steps to me. So these all came from people who had gotten it from Prabhupada. The books get things from Prabhupada. And when I was in India, Prabhupada had asked, you know, Prabhupada understood legal matters and things well, because you have to remember, Prabhupada had a good education, and they asked if there was an attorney who could help write the book trust. And my mother had been writing, she'd been defending the devotees when they had problems, so they asked her to come up and meet with Prabhupada. And my mother spoke about this at a women's conference, and we just have a small screen back there, but I just found this one. We'll show this real quick and commented on it. We'll have to kind of gather by that screen there.
And past the Montparnasse, and they lived in a little 2 or 3 story, I mean, it was on the 2nd or 3rd story apartment. As I recall, there were only 8 or 10 of them, led by Hari Vilas, who was from Chicago or Michigan. This was in Paris. And even with that small group, and clear back in 1971, they made their presence very well known. They went on Sankirtan all over the streets, and I went with them a few times, and sometimes they were well received, but I remember the slop bucket that was thrown on us from some house. And they also gave lectures and feasts at the American University in Paris. And so quite a few people became interested in that and came to the movement. After Kevin was in Paris, he went to India and was in Bombay for some period of time. And I happened to be in London at a bar association meeting, and I thought, well, that's real close to Bombay. I'll run over there. And so I visited him there, and that was extremely interesting. That was the summer of '71. That temple was headed by Madhuvisa, and not more than 10 people, maybe 10 or 12. And they lived in an apartment a good ways out from the center of town, but it was very interesting. The Pakistani embassy was on one floor, and they occupied a floor. And Ravi Shankar, the sitarist, lived on another floor. So it was kind of an interesting building. Again, that was early in the movement, but they were very well received because it was at a time when the Indian youth were straying away from their religious beliefs, and the parents were very upset about it. And so here were these American youths following their principles. So they invited them to speak and come to their homes to show an example of American youth. I don't remember any women in the group in Paris, but there were several women in Bombay. Tulsi, I remember, a small girl, and I don't remember that there was any difference in participation between the men and the women. I remember that Tulsi was a particularly dedicated and hard-working devotee, and there were some others in there too, but she's the one I remember personally. In the early 70s, I represented the Laguna chapter, or individuals in it. Seems to me Steve was one of them at one time, weren't you? Who got arrested for various things, various egregious crimes like chanting on the sidewalk and being on the beach and so forth. And I remember one young girl who was arrested for just such an egregious crime and kept overnight in jail and given a body search for chanting on the sidewalk. And I went before the city council several times. They were not well received at that time. It was a hard job. And I guess as a result of doing some of that, I became acquainted with Karanda, head of the LA temple. And I had a number of conversations with him, and he asked me if I would help Prabhupada with the book trust. And I said to the extent that I was capable, I would. And so he sent me a draft of the proposed trust prepared by an attorney in India, and then gave me verbally some of the ideas that Prabhupada wanted to incorporate in it. So I prepared a draft of the Bhagavad-Gita book trust and sent it to Karanda to propose to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada came back with a number of questions and then invited me up. And so I think we went up within a few days in July of 71. And I had the honor to meet with Prabhupada privately and personally. When I say private, I'm quite sure Karanda was there. But it was very informal and very pleasant and very easy. There was no arrogance or ostentation about him whatsoever. And we didn't sit at an office austerely across from one another, but we sat in a back chamber and talked in a very congenial, personal manner. I asked him if he knew my son, Shritidas, and he said, "Isn't that the young brahmachari in Bombay?" I said, "Yes, that's him." And actually, I met with Prabhupada before I made that trip to Bombay, so I was sort of big stuff when I got there to Bombay. Announced who I had just been with. And, so I prepared the book trust for him, and he had a number of things he wanted included. He was very clear. He had a lot of confidence in his trustees, which included Karanda and Shima Sundar. I don't know, I'm sure the London lady will know those people. Huh? Oh, to whom? Oh, well, I guess that scratches my next 4 paragraphs. Now, I enjoyed them very much, and Prabhupada had a great deal of confidence in their discretion, and he emphasized that he wanted them. I kept asking, do you want these limitations and these restrictions, and he did not. He had a lot of confidence in those trustees, and he wanted them to have the discretion, but he was very clear that the book trust should be handled as a separate entity, that the proceeds go 50% to the book fund, which would generate new books and printing and everything that had to do with the publications. I should say, you probably all know anyway, that at that point he assigned all his publications, all his writings and copyrights to the trust. And 50% of the proceeds then were to go to the book fund and 50% to the building fund to be used for acquisition of new properties and improvement of properties for temples all over the world. And then, curiously enough, he asked, I have notes that he, when I was visiting him, that he asked me to incorporate a provision that in the discretion of the trustees, they could make donations to other charitable contributions, whatever, having nothing to do with Krishna consciousness. And so that was hopefully the beginning of that. I was very privileged and honored to have met with him, but his demeanor with me was so easy and warm and friendly and personal that it didn't seem like a big job at all. He made me very comfortable from the outset. I think I'm becoming inelegant, which means not short and not sweet. See if I had anything. Oh, one last comment on my travels. I visited Kevin in South Africa when there were just Rishi Kumar and Shritidas were there, and as I recall, Prabhupada had given them a large supply of books for distribution in Durban and Johannesburg. And they were the only two devotees with this pile of books. And they were very well received there too by the Indians. There was, when we flew into, my husband and I flew into Durban, there were several very prominent businessmen there to meet us, and it stayed in my mind for a long time because apartheid was much in evidence in those days. And so these very, very fine-looking people accompanied us to our hotel, and we invited them in, and of course they couldn't come in because apartheid applied to Indians as well as to blacks and any minorities. And so my husband at that time, who was quite a gagster, changed our room wherever it was and put it up where the suites were up near the top, and took them around to the back elevator, and we smuggled them in. And they came up, and they were delightful people. And I think that you met with some of them, didn't you, on a trip over there? Some of those people are since very much involved in the new temples that have been built there. Then after Rishi Kumar left, Kevin stayed on and sold the whole package before he came home. That's right, you were. That's right. Which is a compliment from that country. I'd just like to comment that I think the changes in the movement are so dramatic and so significant and so meaningful since those days that I've been telling you about. I think my objection in those days was the cloistered manner in which they were living and the isolation from society, and I didn't like that. I found that very difficult, and I think there was a great deal of opposition from people in general who never took the time to find out what was going on. And now today, you all still retain the same values and apply them, but you apply them in every aspect of society, business and social, and I think that's extremely meaningful for your movement as well as productive for society in general. I think I've cut somebody's speech down short. Thank you.
He turned 25 years old. 25! And Shaiva Shuddha says, that's nothing, I'm 30. 30? Now I have a granddaughter, 26, right? At that time, 30 was old. So we see that these things are brought into place by how Prabhupada very graciously, you know, he was very powerful when he did things like get this temple off the ground and get people moving. Because, you know, the American devotees would dilly-dally and do things later, the Indians are worse than that, right? Isn't it? It's always you see people working, and there's more of them who are watching than actually doing the work, right? You see them, you know, it's like, I think the system of work here is that the workers pretend to work and the employers pretend to pay them. Is that about right? Yes? So it's a lot of pretending going on, but Prabhupada didn't like pretending. He wanted to get it done and get it going, you know, get this temple going. Because otherwise, if we're still talking about it later, there'd be no temple and no people here. So Prabhupada knew when to push things and when to be encouraging to people. But you see how he affected my mother there. And that's how he shows us the example of how to be. It's easier for us to pick up these principles. You know, Prabhupada came, you know, to America, and we see that money would come, he'd use it all in Krishna's service. Like when I wrote to him that the sannyasi had taken the money, when that person, I'm glad I wrote that, because when that person went to Mumbai, the letter had already gotten there, right? And Prabhupada told him, you left that young boy alone there and took all the money with you and left him with a $15,000 book debt? He says, you give me what money you have. So the sannyasi gave him $700. And the next letter from Prabhupada came with a receipt for $700 credited to my book bill. I didn't ask Prabhupada, please make sure to get some money from him because I need it for the book bill, but he did. So Prabhupada was looking out for us, and he was always looking out for us through his books now. He spent so much time putting into those books, and that was looking out for all of us. because I find, like I commented the other day in the class, you know, if I spend the time reading, I find what I need to know. And I'm sure that other people need to know the same things, because I know these books weren't written just for me. Other people must go through the same things. But if they don't read them, they won't find out. If you don't read them, you won't find out what's in them. That's obvious. And if what's in them is what you need to know, then let's say in this book it tells you where 10 kilos of gold is. Yeah, I'll read it later, right? Is it? Is that what you'd say? No. So the benefits are there if we don't take advantage of them, just like Prabhupada was there for physical association. He's even more there through his books. And you can see how he set up this book trust and how he didn't want the restrictions put on trustees. So, any questions or comments to any of this? Yes?
You were a very intelligent mother.
Is she still around?
No, she passed away. She passed away.
First, a nice comment for you.
Yes.
Her mother was giving speech. She was looking just like a newsreader.
Yes.
And she's looking just like a newsreader. One who read the news, she was looking like that one.
Newscaster, yes. Well, because she would go to court and Prabhupada told her she was a Kshatriya. You know, what was amazing is people came along later and they wanted to sue the book trust. And they told my mother, they said, we wanted to see what a mess you and Prabhupada made out of the book trust. She says, okay, I'll tell you 4 things. Number 1, she said, number 1, I'm trying to unentangle this at the same time. Number 1, she said, Prabhupada knew exactly what he wanted, and he understood exactly what I had done, this is her speaking, more than any clients she had. And her clients owned like cities like Placentia or the Emerald Bay Community Association. It was big stuff, because trust means you have something to protect. So she said Prabhupada knew more than any of these people what he wanted. And she said she'd been a trust attorney for 27 years when she wrote the book trust. And the person who was trying to sue it wasn't even their field. And they said, when this isn't your field, you go to court, they're going to ask you what you're doing here because it's not your field. And number 4, once you have a document, you're not allowed to enter anything else into testimony. So Prabhupada told her she was a Kshatriya because she'd go and fight for the devotees when they had trouble, you know, saying, oh, you're arresting them for chanting on the street. Isn't there other crimes you could?
Just like you are giving
Yes.
example, you have the books all with you.
Yes.
Our books in there, one thing.
Yes.
Previously, we had to carry so many books to read this one.
Yes.
So this change of the time can be continued, and can we see that we can put all the books in one small pack, and so that it will be easy to carry, because now we are distributing so many books outside. We ask people, you get Bhagavatam, you get this one. So to carry those books is very difficult. So if you put a small pack like this and give to the
Well, people who are savvy, what they do is they have a place in the books where it shows you can download them. So, I don't know, I suppose you could try to sell Kindles with all of it on there, but you know, it gets into a funny part, because a Kindle, the other thing is not something that you can, you know, we sell the others, it's a donation people are giving, so it's tax-free, but if you're selling an item, so I guess you could sell it separately and put the books on it. But there's places in the books where it talks about downloading them, and some of the people who are savvy with that go and download, like the one person said he bought the one book and then he downloaded the others, or he saw where to do it and downloaded that. But books are kind of exciting, and people look at them and we have pictures and explain them, and it's kind of easier to do that than it is to do the tech part if somebody asks about it. Especially here, I don't see as many people. People come up to me and wonder what I'm reading and ask if it's a tablet. It's not a tablet, it's not a computer. You know, so I don't know if they're as savvy to that. And it's kind of like there, they said, you know, people ask about the Gita, or they show them the Bhagavatam or whatever, but to try to explain the technology to someone and explain the book too is kind of, you know, if you have a thing that shows that and people ask about it, you can show that. But especially here, I don't see that many. Do you see many people here reading in those who aren't already acquainted with the temple and how to do that? Well, you think you could sell Kindles there along with the...
Last time I advised to Bhima Prabhu, his deputy in charge. So I think you see nowadays nobody is like to carry the books. Now if you want to go to Vrindavan, you cannot carry all the books. You have this everything here. So it is here. So we have to think about others also, general, when we are distributing the books to others, then how these people will be carrying these books from one place to another place. So instead of this one, just like Prabhupada wanted to print the books. Yes, Prabhupada wanted to print the books, but time and suppleness, we should use our intelligence and how we should distribute these books and how we should give them these books.
Well, we kind of have to do a combination, because the good thing with a book is that people take it home and they look at it and they see it and other people see it. So I think we make it available, but I don't think we stop doing the books or push it in that way. We try to make that available, maybe have more information about how to download things, especially here where you're not making a big profit on books. You know, now in Laguna too, it's the same way. We have congregation people go out twice a month and they distribute books and they invite people to the temple, but they don't really make a big profit. Where in the old days, we'd get, in the 70s, we'd get $6,000 worth of books and we'd sell it for about $13,000 and we'd support the temple off the other 7. Whereas now you're not supporting the temple off the book distribution, right? That's what we used to do. You know, the books would be, half the money would go from that. So if the book cost, say, $1.25 to print, they would charge $2.50 to the temple, and the temple would sell it for $5 or $6. So that was the way the system was working. Whereas now, they're not as concerned. Money comes into the hundi, people make donations, and they're not concerned to run the temple on the profit from the books. So considering that, you can turn people to downloading also. It's kind of hard to do scores in that. I guess you can have a tracker that tracks how many people downloaded. But if people have the books, other people will read them and look at them, and we have it available. You can download them. And people who are savvy, it shows in the book how to do it. People who are savvy just do it. And people who aren't, it's kind of hard to explain to them how to do it. So we have to figure some way to incorporate it, but not change books for that. Yes?
Plus with books. Plus with books, there's so many wonderful stories, but one just popped in my mind I heard in Alachua. But it took place in like Croatia or someplace that a person had gotten a book and they just bought it and brought it home, weren't interested in reading it, and so somebody used it because they had an uneven table. So they put it on the floor to make the table even, and it was there for about 10 years. And when they moved the table, because they got some new furniture, the son had grown up a little, and he read the book and became a devotee.
Yeah.
So it doesn't happen with the...
Well, and the thing is with that, the people who, if you're trying to explain it to someone, like someone gave it to me as a gift with all Prabhupada's books on it, but I'm not sure quite how to do it. But the people who are savvy with that, they get the book, and the book shows in it where to go to, and they go to that and they download the others.
Plus, database.com is free. And you just tell somebody, database.com, all of Prabhupada's books are there, the whole 6-volume Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Jamunda's cookbook. So
they can download it, or they can just read it from there.
They can download it. They just have to be online. They can read the whole thing.
They can read it online, or they can download it with.
But you can also download.
And
I
you can also
downloaded
download.
on tablet.
Yeah. But people who seem to know that figure it out, and people who don't. People who are already downloading things try to do it. But when you say download it to someone, like you grab one of these people out here and say, buy this Kindle, and then you go download the books, they may not know what you mean. Correct? Would they? Would you be able to sell Kindles to people and tell them with this you can download they might not believe you. So I don't know that it's easier just to distribute the books and then maybe have cards available to do that, but yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this wonderful video of your mother. It's precious. And she, in her voice you can see she's so proud of you and the movement that you have joined as well. Regarding the books, I have read many times and I have heard many times that just by touching the book,
Yes.
one gets purified. And by bringing the book in the house, the hard book in the house, it purifies the environment. So a Kindle cannot do that. Kindle is convenient for us traveling in pictures, but it cannot be compared with having a hard-bound book in your hands. Just the power of reading from the book. Yeah, I use technology as well, but I always go back to my book in my hand because you feel Prabhupada. You feel Krishna talking. The Kindle, for me personally, doesn't have that energy.
Prabhupada's words have the energy.
Yeah,
They're in it, but the difference is you take the book home, other people can read it, or if I have the whole set, only I can read it, whereas if I have the whole set in my house, people are going to look at them. Books are attractive, especially, you see, like now they do a different Krishna book here, but the original one Prabhupada did, it was bigger than most books, but it was smaller than like the atlases, so it was a unique size. In the bookshelf, it was smaller than the atlases, but bigger than every other book. That's going to be the one they go to. In the bookshelf, they'll pick that one up. What's that book? It's bigger than the small ones and smaller than the big ones. So, you know, it'll attract other people, and it has pictures, and it has a whole orientation.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm just having a question.
Yes, go ahead.
My question is, fifth line, where Prabhupada purport says, the person acting in Krishna consciousness is really a sannyasi, one in the renounced order of life. So my question is, why does devotee has to go through that sannyas outfit, sannyas, ashram?
Well, because you're acting like a sannyasi for a while, but the other one is they're making a commitment to do it forever. But the idea is you don't just jump. You don't just think, well, as a householder or whatever, they do whatever they want, and then when it's time to renounce, then you change everything.
My comment was just about the books.
Yes.
I have a ladies' CC reading group. We move
Uh-huh.
from house to house.
Yes.
And many people are using their
Yes.
technological books.
Mm-hmm.
But if I have a hard book, I like to have it because it has the pictures and the
Yes.
and the paintings. Prabhupada said they're like windows to the spiritual world.
Yes. See, a lot of people aren't traveling all the time either.
I'm not against it.
No, it's good, and they don't travel, and they don't read it like intensely where you read lots and lots and lots. If they take one book on a 1-week vacation, you know, I read some days 200-300 pages in a day, and I'm gone for months. They may be gone for a couple weeks and they're on vacation and they don't, so, you know, if they take one book with them, that's probably enough, so. But it doesn't mean it's good we have it available. And I think people who are savvy for that look for the ways. And people who aren't can figure it out even if you explain it to them. Is that not true?
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Whereas you don't have to explain to someone how to read a book. No, and that gets them started in it, you know, that's the whole idea. It gets them started.